So this is what I kind of specialize in, ladies, if you don't know that yet by now, but estrogen and progesterone, those are two of those female reproductive hormones that when they start to drop as we age, it does affect insulin sensitivity. And that is a fact. And I'm not making that up. I've experienced this. It is in medical science that this is what's happening. These hormones are impacted because, it's all about balance. And those same hormones are being impacted by that stress hormone. So again, we're looking at all the pieces here, aren't we? Trying to add up all the things that could be affecting those overnight highs. Welcome to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. My name is Melissa Slemp, a certified nutritional health coach and the founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa, where I help women with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. Each week, I will bring conversations and strategies from guest experts and my experience living with type 1 for over 40 years now. So if you're a woman ready to redefine how diabetes can look and feel for you, then the Type 1 and Midlife podcast is the show for you. Nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your doctor before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, hello and welcome. I love to do these little solo shows, these little solo episodes to bring you some value on very common issues that many of us women with type 1 diabetes may be struggling with. And today's topic actually came from my Type 1 and Midlife community over on the Honey Health Diabetes app. And if you haven't had a chance to join this amazing community, the download is the app is a free download, and you can see the link right here in my show notes as well if you are ready to jump over and join our community and say hello. Again, my group is called Type 1 and Midlife. Lots of great contributors and experts in the field that are also in there, just bringing lots of value and support for those of us living with diabetes. So today we're going to talk about morning highs. Sometimes it's overnight highs that can wreck our morning with blood sugar. Dawn phenomenon does tend to be the term that we know. And, that's a term that gets tossed around a lot. And generally speaking, I think we do understand what that means. But just to give you a quick definition, just so that we're clear as to exactly what we are talking about today. And like I was saying, this topic came up from some ladies in our group that were really struggling with this, just not understanding why, what to do, all the things that they're trying as far as trying to prevent these overnight highs or waking up higher than what is expected or really that makes sense. And just that overwhelm, and I totally understand because I've been there myself. So these are things that I have personally had to kind of navigate and try to find answers to myself. So we are in this together. So dawn phenomenon, generally it is between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. And it's when blood sugar levels rise naturally due to hormonal shifts like increased growth hormones and cortisol, which can lead to insulin resistance, which is really what we're talking about right now. And your body is, it's just protecting and providing glucose for the day. And it's undergoing this process just naturally. And it happens for everybody, and it's different for everybody. And the impact of that rise in blood sugar, again, is different for everyone, whether you have diabetes or not. I think we just tend to see it because it's evident on our glucometer, it's evident on our CGM, the alarms that are going off, and it's not a fun way to wake up and to begin your day with this, which just seems like a wall. So I do understand. So today I'm going to help kind of unpack all this. So I'm going to start with 10 factors that impact our glucose. And these are probably not going to surprise you. But as I'm walking through these 10, I'm then going to list some ways that we can kind of mitigate or head off some of these things. And, I think the first thing we can do with anything in life is really just looking at it from kind of a high view and looking at the whole picture of all the things that may be contributing to this trend that we're having. Because generally speaking, overnight and morning high blood sugars, it does tend to be a trend. Every once in a while, if we're lucky, it's just a fluke, and we can usually pin it back to maybe something that we had to eat that night, or something that went, there's something that happened with our insulin delivery, and all those are the obvious things, right? Those are things that we can really say, okay, I know exactly why that happened, and the next night, it doesn't happen, because you were able to, to figure that out, and you had something to point to. Well, in this case, so what we're talking about today is really those things that it's ongoing and it's frustrating and nothing seems to be working. So let's start at the top. So the 10 factors that impact glucose, and this obviously happens throughout the day and the night, not just the nighttime. So the number one is food, right? And one thing I wanted to mention here too, and I'm going to talk more into this in just a few minutes when I share some ways that we can reverse this, is generally speaking, meals, so a dinner, sometimes it's the timing of our dinner, but a higher fat dinner will delay glucose metabolism and cause a sugar rise, generally anywhere from 2 to 4 hours after we have that meal. And a good example is pizza, right? We all have a pizza story, or maybe too many of them. And hopefully we're not avoiding the pizza just based on that fear of what it's going to do to our blood sugar. Again, I think it's all about knowing what to expect and being able to come up with a plan in order to avoid, that drastic high that may happen. So the first one was food, and we will dive more into that when I get into the bottom of this list here in just a minute. Number two is insulin on board. So this is both our basal, which is our basal rate, which is driven either your MDI like myself or your pump settings. That is going to be your basal rate. And then it is your bolus. So that is what we are having to dose or choosing to dose, or insulin is giving, or I should say our insulin pump is giving us that dose around the dinner time hour. So that's a huge piece of the puzzle. We know that this is what, we kind of go through life with diabetes. It's food, it's insulin, it's exercise. Those are the things that we know are going to be the most immediate impact and factors that are going to affect the glucose level. But again, hold with me here, because there's lots of other little factors that are going to speak to you once I get them all out. So the third one is very similar to the second one, but it's your basal rate. And, they say the basal rate is that one thing, again, whether you're on a pump or you're doing daily injections like myself, that basal rate is really the golden key. When we can get that rate dialed in, and it's going to be based on our carb to insulin settings, ratios, and our lifestyle. And it's nice too when we can actually make alternatives, or I should say changes to that rate based on our day, which I love the freedom of that. And that's something that you work on with your healthcare provider. There's a lot of autonomy in that, where we know our body, we know what to expect. And we know, and maybe it's that time of your cycle, if you are still in those reproductive years, when you know that you are less or more insulin sensitive, so that you can adjust those basal rates. So sleep is another instance where maybe that needs to be changed during your sleeping hours. So take note of that. And we will go on to number 4, which is stress. Cortisol, oh my gosh, this impacts us all the time. Anytime we're hurried, we're rushed, we feel overwhelmed, physically, emotionally, cortisol is dumped. And again, it's different for all of us, and it's not always the same. I think that might be the frustrating part, because I think it would be easier to like dose for or account for if we really knew what kind of impact stress has on us personally. But it's just something to be aware of, just to be aware of and to know that this does affect us. The next one, so this is number 5, is our hormone levels. So this is what I kind of specialize in, ladies, if you don't know that yet by now, but estrogen and progesterone, those are two of those female reproductive hormones that when they start to drop as we age, it does affect insulin sensitivity. And that is a fact. And I'm not making that up. I've experienced this. It is in medical science that this is what's happening. These hormones are impacted because, it's all about balance. And those same hormones are being impacted by that stress hormone. So again, we're looking at all the pieces here, aren't we? Trying to add up all the things that could be affecting those overnight highs. So number 6 is caffeine. So caffeine is going to affect obviously that cortisol when we are putting too much of that stimulant, which is caffeine, which is what caffeine is. And it's real important to understand, or to recognize when you might be drinking caffeine or having caffeine and how that might be impacting your insulin sensitivity. It is connected. Number 7 is poor sleep, which is this is just part of the whole package we're talking about, because if we're up with high blood sugar and we're having to dose and then it's hard to go back to sleep, obviously that can definitely point to poor sleep. But generally speaking, our sleep quality does affect our insulin sensitivity. Our body is meant to rest and repair and restore as we're sleeping. And when this is not happening, again, it's going into more of it's a protective mode. Again, it's what our body is designed to do. And when we are low on sleep, guess what that does? That's increasing the cortisol as well. So you see how all these are connected. So number 8 is alcohol. So alcohol can affect blood sugar rise and fall, as again, how it's kind of the timing of alcohol, how it's combined with food. And that again is another puzzle that needs to be put together. So again, something to be aware of. And number 9 is sickness. So we know that anytime there is sometimes it's just a viral, a cold or maybe allergies or something like that. Again, your body is trying to protect itself. It's trying to keep you going, and it secretes cortisol. We're seeing a common word here, aren't we, ladies? So cortisol is, again, our body is producing some glucose from the liver, again, to protect us when we are ill and to make sure that we have the energy and obviously the glucose to keep going, to keep our brains functioning and all of that. So that's just something to be aware of as well. And number 10, if you are an insulin pump user, there are some things that happen with the tubing and the delivery system. So pump malfunctions really do contribute to this. Now, this may be an isolated case. Obviously, if this is something that's happening continually, definitely speak with your healthcare team about this. But again, it's a factor that when we're not getting that steady flow of insulin, when our basal rate is not set where it needs to be and it's staying consistent, it's all about consistency, isn't it? Then that can obviously impact our blood sugar overnight. So I hope that probably raised some thoughts and some ideas, those 10 things that I just mentioned. And this is actually a good time if you can, as you're listening to this, and if you're at a place where you can maybe take notes and write down some of those things that might really be some of these factors, maybe some things you hadn't thought about that may be causing your issues. Again, if you are having those overnight highs and early morning highs, I invite you to jot that down. Make a note of it. and to be more aware of that this may be the piece to that puzzle, just trying to kind of connect the dots. So keep a log and so that we can take a step, because it's all about taking steps, because information is great, but if we don't do anything with it, then it's just information, right? It's not, it's not putting it and using it and, taking some steps forward. So in menopause, all of these things that I just mentioned, those 10 things that affect glucose, there's some variations. Guess what, ladies? So it gets a little tougher when we are hitting perimenopause. Again, when the estrogen and the progesterone and the testosterone, all those hormones start to go down. Natural, but it's got some side effects. It's got some symptoms that come along, and it's just so important for us to be aware of that. So estrogen is dropping, and as we are entering this stage of life, and we become more insulin resistant. And with all this happening, you're getting poor sleep. We just talked about that. So with poor sleep, guess what? It's causing more insulin resistance. And then the poor sleep, maybe it's caused by some of the symptoms of menopause, like the hot flashes and the restlessness and not being able to shut the brain off at night. I know that was one of my issues when I was going through perimenopause, was just that constant speed of the brain and the anxiety and just go, go, go. I just couldn't shut it down. I didn't feel like I had any control over that. So again, being aware that this happens. It happens more or less for all of us. So it's just important to be aware. So with this vicious cycle, and I think stress seemed to be the number one thing that popped out. It popped out to me. I don't know about you, but those 8 things that I mentioned. So where do you start, right? So again, like I said, if you're at a point now after hearing this, and this topic and these ideas are speaking to you, now let's see what we can take a step with. So here are, speaking of steps, some ways to avoid those blood sugar spikes during the night and early morning, or better known as dawn phenomenon. So the very first one I want to start with is to monitor your blood sugar. And again, we are used to doing this, aren't we? So whether you are using a glucometer and still doing the finger sticks, or you're on a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, pay attention to the trends. And many of these systems have reports that are attached to the actual apps that they are loaded on. Those are really good reports. And if you can find a way to either look at them or even print them out, just to see where what time and what your trends are overnight. You can definitely look at it to see what your trends are with your blood sugar throughout the day. That's very helpful. But to really look at it overnight, just to see what's happening, so you can kind of back into the information and to identify patterns so that you can better understand it all. Okay. Number 2, this is the second second way to avoid the blood sugar spikes. That's to optimize bedtime snacks. So this may sound funny because, we think of going to bed after eating a snack. Well, generally speaking, wouldn't that raise our blood sugar? I think it definitely, it points to really what our whole evening looks like, right? So maybe you were heading to bed, an hour before bed, and you were starting to trend low. Your blood sugar was starting to drop. So you knew that you safely needed to eat something before you go into bed, whether it's eating or maybe drinking something, whatever that looks like for you. But balanced, again, I talk about balance a lot, but balanced meals, as we know, are real important just to help head off the spike. So balance meaning including a source of protein and a healthy fat to help slow down the rise in blood sugar when we're eating. And this rule really applies to our snacks as well. I think the first instinct that we have is to take something that's really sweet, especially if we're trending low and ready to go to bed. We just want to get our blood sugar up to a safe number so that we can just go to sleep, right? To lay down and go to bed. But it is a better idea to make it more of a balanced snack that is it's going to get us to a safe level, but it's not going to get us there too quickly. So again, when this happens, and we may be even waking up in the middle of the night after a sweeter type of a snack or a simple carbohydrate snack, and our system might be feeling like it's under stress, and that is where the liver may be uh, kind of producing that glucagon that we were talking about, which is, again, that is what rises our blood sugar. So that's the connection with the whole dawn phenomenon, is the liver producing insulin. I'm sorry, the liver producing glucagon. Okay, so that was the second one. It's to optimize your bedtime snacks. Number three is to time your insulin doses. Now, this is a huge topic, obviously, and you definitely got to work with your healthcare provider about this. And like I was mentioning before, is the basal settings. My gosh, when we can get that dialed in, it really helps with this issue that we're talking about, the overnight highs. And also to be looking at what your setting is, your short acting, your bolus insulin at dinner time. So just again, following those trends, getting a better idea of really how much insulin you need at that time. And you might even be underdosing. So again, these are things we just got to look at and consider and to learn from in order to really understand. And it's a good conversation to have with the doctor or your healthcare provider about what's going on. And again, looking at those trend reports that I was mentioning, I know the Dexcom has a report, and the Freestyle Libre has a report as well. So take those and learn from them, and just to see what those trends are. Okay, so step number 4, another thing to consider is to manage, this is the magic word of the hour, managing the stress and the cortisol levels. So throughout the day is where we want to be looking at this, right? So what we do all day is really going to determine not only the activity of our brain, our thoughts, physically and emotionally, and all of those things that really do signal to our body whether or not we are under stress. And when it gets closer to bedtime, it's even more important that we have all of that kind of in a low level. So some things to practice are before bedtime. These are some of my favorite things. Is just to get down on the floor. Believe it or not, I put a yoga mat out and I do some gentle stretching. And you could just do some yoga, deep breathing exercises and some yoga. Oh my gosh, poses, whatever feels good to you. But it is just about bringing it down and inducing more melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. So that melatonin is going to offset that cortisol. It just naturally does. Anything that we can do naturally and with intention and set a routine around, like doing some deep breathing, some, journaling might be something where you can just kind of do a brain dump at the end of the night where you're not taking that to the bedroom with you. So introducing stress reducing practices do make a difference. And something I'm going to be talking about here towards the end is a couple of my favorite products. And I'll just give you a sneak peek. Ashwagandha is one. And this is an amazing herb that you can take throughout the day just to help calm and relax the nervous system. So I'll share more about that here in just a moment. Number 5 is to prioritize quality sleep. And this is an interesting one because it seems, well, obviously that's what we want to do. That's why we're talking about this, right? But we want to stay consistent with our sleep schedule because, again, we want to get the body back into a natural flowing rhythm. And the sooner we can do that, the better. So what we can do during the day is getting that natural sunlight to set that circadian rhythm, just sun on our face for 15, 20 minutes during the during the early morning really, really helps. It helps to reset the circadian rhythm, like I said, and the cortisol rises in the AM, which is natural, and falls at night as melatonin kicks in. So we want that cortisol to go down during the afternoon and the evening hours. And we want that melatonin to kick in to help us get a more restful night of sleep. And all of this is going to help control cortisol, that stress hormone. And it obviously, quality sleep helps regulate our hormones, all of these hormones, and it improves insulin sensitivity. So I know you've got to start with something. And I know this is one of those, well, is it the cart before the horse, right? Because you've got to be able to control the blood sugars overnight in order to get quality sleep. And then you need quality sleep in order to get, to be able to have those blood sugars that you can sleep through. So, but start with that first thing that I just mentioned, as far as just thinking about reducing the stress and getting that morning sunlight exposure and just seeing how that works. I actually take a walk. So I get out with the dog and I don't wear my sunglasses in the morning now. I do wear a hat just to kind of protect my face a little bit. But it's just nice to get the natural rays of the sun just hitting your face. It's so good too. I guess I live in Florida too. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier for where I am. But find your way with that. So number 6 is to embrace a balanced diet. So this is real important. So we want to focus on a diverse and a diet that is very nourishing, obviously, because this is going to help, again, with how our body feels. It's going to lower our stress. The nutrients we need are going to feed us in so many ways. And to avoid the excess carbs, the carbohydrates at dinner. So this to me is probably the easiest way to kind of head this problem off, is to really be looking at your plate at night and lots of vegetables, lots of non-starchy vegetables, 3 to 4 ounces of protein source, and some healthy fats. It could be some olive oil. It could be some hemp seeds on top of a salad. It could be 1/2 of an avocado. Again, this is a beautiful way to eat and nourish yourself at night. It's easy to dose for when there's not a lot of carbohydrates to factor in. And I think when we can just stay steady prior to sleep time, where there's not any sort of a spike and then something that we may have to correct before bedtime, it's going to make that overnight easier on the body and easier on the blood sugar. So try that one out and let me know how it goes and how it feels. Number 7 is to stay hydrated. And this is an all day thing. So drinking water can help us maintain stable blood sugars. How about that? So avoiding the sugary drinks. And then we talked about the caffeine. So definitely pick things that are more hydrating throughout the day and try to stay away from that caffeine. I know my cutoff point is I try to stop it before 10 a.m. If I go over a little bit, then I can usually get away with that. But I definitely don't have any caffeinated drinks in the afternoon. I know how that's again, it's getting me revved up. It's impacting my that stress hormone. It's impacting, all of those, that stimulant. All of that's just kind of getting in a higher gear and at a time of the day where we should be doing just the opposite. We should be starting to kind of wind it down, getting ready for, a relaxing evening, right? And finally, number 8, and this is something that I do recommend. I work with clients, and this conversation, I help them alongside their healthcare provider. And I don't replace any sort of recommendations. It's just about support and accountability and giving them, giving them that information so that they know what to talk to their doctor about, things they can work on. And again, that all is in reflection to what their suggestions are in relation to their care with diabetes and their insulin pump and all of those things that are around, what we do every day with blood sugar. And another thing I wanted to mention is if you are also experiencing a lot of you in this on this show and in this audience, the listeners here are in the um, perimenopause to postmenopause stage of life. So if you're also experiencing those typical symptoms of hot flashes, the brain fog, the mood changes, the weight gain, achy joints, and that's just a few of them. Those are just the most commonly ones. But there's over 100 different symptoms that we don't even tie back to what's going on with our hormones at that time of life. I really recommend that, again, if you are experiencing dawn phenomenon, you are seeing insulin resistance, and you're also approaching perimenopause. So, your periods are getting shorter or different or further apart, and you're noticing some changes and these symptoms that I just mentioned. Definitely talk with your doctor about getting your hormone levels tested. And you may experience some pushback on that because many doctors, they don't necessarily believe in testing or even understanding what to do with the test results or how to interpret them or how to support you on that. But it is important to get a baseline because you need to know where you are. And if there's something with your hormone levels that you can point to in order to better explain your insulin sensitivity, what's trending right now. So it's nice to put the pieces together. I was in that situation myself. And once I got my levels checked, I was in my early 50s. It was a game changer because it's like, oh, okay, I'm not going crazy. This really is why. And then when I further learned that, yes, when our hormones drop, it does naturally affect our system's ability to process glucose or inability to process glucose. So it doesn't make it easier, but it definitely helps to have a reason why. That way you can really, and then you can make those steps, those steps to make some changes and to see what your next step is. And if you're interested in learning more about my journey into hormone replacement, I love talking about it and sharing my story. I have a lot of free resources that help explain and support women on this. You can obviously look at the show notes here. Some of those are linked right there, or send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Blood Sugar Boss, and I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you're experiencing and how I can support you. And finally, I wanted to wrap this up, and I hope these topics or this topic and these factors that you were reminded of. Sometimes we forget about all the things that affect glucose levels and response. And I think the number one thing we walked away with today is how impactful stress is. So let's find some ways to reduce that. And first and foremost, to become aware of it and to recognize it. And, you are worth the effort to put into this, and your well-being and your sleep and how you're feeling about life with diabetes. It does matter. So these are two supplements that I use and recommend. And I have all of this linked here in the show notes as well. You can go over to my website and see my favorites. I have a dispensary that I am able to share with my clients, and I use it myself, of course. And you can get a discount on these are pharmaceutical grade, top-notch supplements, and a lot of different brands, a lot of different types of supplements. So they have a huge library of things to choose from. But I do have my favorites that I do suggest that many women, friends, and clients check out, and just to see if this is something that would fit in with them and what they need right now. First one I wanted to mention was maca root powder. So this is a root vegetable that is native from Peru. And it's considered a superfood. I think it's called a superfood because it can be added to food, obviously. I usually stir it in my coffee in the morning. You can also put it into a smoothie. I've stirred it into my chia seed pudding once or twice too. It does have a taste, I will be honest, but it does mix in well with other things that you're eating or drinking, and over time you'll get used to the taste. But the benefits for us, especially during menopause, and especially when we are also balancing blood sugar, trying to keep those A1Cs in a range that we are feeling really good about, it does matter. So some of the benefits are it boosts our energy and our libido. So it's really good for it's a natural adaptogen. So it doesn't contain plant estrogens or other hormones, but it acts as an adaptogen. Boy, I say that 5 times fast, to help balance your own hormone levels. So it just kind of comes in and gives you it gives you a stronger foundation to support your levels as they are dropping, as you are aging. So again, another big help. And maca root, it also reduces hot flashes and night sweats. It improves our mood and our blood pressure and our energy, and it supports bone health. So guess what, ladies? Those are all things that we need to keep our eye on and to help support as we are entering the stage of life and beyond. And secondly, the second supplement that I mentioned earlier is ashwagandha. So this herb is naturally reduces stress, anxiety, and cortisol levels. And it's said to help improve energy, your focus, and guess what? Our insulin sensitivity. So what it is stated to do, it may reduce blood sugar levels through its effects on insulin secretion and the cell's ability to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. So again, it's all about that efficiency. And there might be more effects seen with those living with prediabetes and type 2. But I don't see why, even if we are manually injecting insulin, I would think the same reaction would happen, whether your body's producing it or we're injecting it. I would think the body would still respond with a optimal use of how it's just secreting the insulin. And again, it's all about that sensitivity, right? Making it easier for the day-to-day with diabetes, right? And both of these are linked here in the show notes. So you can hop over to my site and see the products that I recommend. And there's some more in there as well if you want to look around, shop around. And please reach out if you have any questions. If any of this that I mentioned today and went over spoke to you, you have something else that maybe came up that maybe I didn't mention, I would love to hear. This show is here for you. Our community over on the Honey Health Diabetes app is here for you, so please join us there. And again, I hope this topic and these strategies that I shared helped you today, and they gave you some steps to take. And please reach out with your own topic ideas. That's why we're here. And let us know what you want to learn more about and expand on. And if you have any guest ideas, somebody that you know in a space that you also follow, let me know. Again, reach out. You can reach me on my website, abundanthealthwithmelissa.com/podcast. And there's a place right there on the page that you can reach out with your show ideas. So again, I am thanking you so much for joining me today. Again, I hope this served you well, and I'll be back in here next week. Same time, same place. You have a blessed, happy, joy-filled day. Until next time, bye. Thank you for listening to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And be sure to check us out at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com for our free resources. See you next week.